There are some nights in Minnesota when the cold feels personal, like the air itself is watching you breathe. That evening at the station had been one of those nights. Frost clung to the windows in thick white patterns, and the stillness outside pressed against the glass as if the darkness wanted inside. I was finishing paperwork when the door burst open hard enough to rattle the bell above it. A girl stumbled in, maybe 15 or 16, pale as moonlight and shaking so hard she could barely stand. Her clothes were dusted with snow, her hair tangled with pine needles. She stared at me with wide, glassy eyes, the kind people get when they are holding back memories they do not want to see again. She gasped between sobs. "There is something in the woods. I saw it. I swear, Sheriff, I saw it." I stood up slowly, raising my hands in a calming gesture. "Sit down. You are okay. You are safe now. Tell me what happened." She backed away from the chair as if it were too close to some unseen danger. Her voice cracked with panic. It had antlers, not like a deer, crooked and long. It moved so fast I could not see its legs. I heard bones crack. It was pale, so pale. She pressed her hands to her face as if trying to block out the memory. My father told me stories, but I thought they were just warnings, just tales. But I saw it. I saw a Wendigo. A chill crawled across my back. In these woods, that word carried weight. I had heard stories from locals and old rangers, whispers of a creature that roamed the frozen trails when winter settled deep. To me, it had always been a legend. Still, something about the way she trembled made my stomach sink. I guided her to the bench near the heater and draped a blanket over her shoulders. "I will go check the trail. Stay here. You are safe with me." She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Do not go alone." Her eyes pleaded with me, but I had to check. Panic can twist shadows into monsters. I told myself that was all this was. I drove the cruiser toward the trailhead, headlights cutting between the dark trunks of the pines. Snow drifted lightly, catching the beams in soft swirls. The forest looked normal at first glance. Still, quiet. Just another winter night in the park. Then I stepped out of the cruiser. The silence hit me like a wall. Not the natural hush of snow. This was a heavy, hollow stillness. No wind, no birds, no rustle of branches. Even my breath felt muffled. I walked toward the start of the trail, boots crunching lightly. My flashlight swept across the trees, and that was when I saw the first claw mark. It cut deep through the bark of an old pine. Clean, deliberate stroke. Too wide for any black bear. Too high for any wolf. I stepped closer and ran a gloved hand along the groove. The cut was fresh. Sap still glistened under the beam. Then I noticed the next tree. And the next. Each one carved. Each one slashed. Not randomly, not outward. Every claw mark faced inward, angled toward the trail as if something had walked the path and marked the trees deliberately, guiding everything toward the interior of the woods. The pattern grew clearer the farther I walked. Clawed trunks stood on either side of the path, forming a narrowing corridor. A funnel. A trap. Something cold unfurled in my chest. The girl's voice replayed in my mind. It was pale. It moved fast. I heard bones. I forced my legs to keep moving. The farther I went, the more wrong the forest felt. The silence deepened until even my footsteps seemed absorbed by it. The cold bit through my jacket and settled in my bones. Frost bent branches inward over the trail. The path ahead looked like a tunnel of ribs, nature folding itself into a cage. My instinct told me to stop, to turn around, to go back and tell the girl I found nothing. But something kept me moving forward. Duty, curiosity, or the faint dread that if I turned my back now, something would step out from behind the trees and follow me. I reached the point where the claw marks narrowed into a tight pattern, as if the trees themselves leaned inward to close around me. Somewhere deeper along the trail, hidden in the dense dark of the pines, something shifted. Just a soft movement, a weight shifting on snow, presence adjusting its stance. I lifted my flashlight. The beam trembled. The forest seemed to hold its breath with me. I was not alone on that trail. Something was waiting deeper in the woods. Something that had marked the trees to guide me exactly where it wanted me to be. The moment that soft movement echoed through the trees, everything inside me tightened. My hand hovered near my holster, though I knew instinctively that whatever was out there was not the kind of thing you reason with or arrest. I lifted the flashlight, but the beam felt weaker here, like the darkness swallowed the light before it reached the next tree. The claw marks continued deeper, more frequent now, sharper, almost surgical. I swept the light over them and saw fresh flakes of bark still clinging to the gouges. Something had clawed them recently. Minutes, maybe less. The same cold that had crawled down my spine twisted deeper, settling in my stomach like a stone. I kept moving, slower now, trying to keep my breathing steady. The forest felt narrower, darker. The claw marks directed me like a hand pushing me onward. Then I saw the first sign that the girl had not just been frightened. A scrap of fabric tied around a low branch. Bright red, torn unevenly. I rubbed the material between my fingers. It was warm from friction. It had been caught there recently. I pictured the girl sprinting down this trail, branches whipping at her, desperate to get away from something behind her. I lowered my flashlight to the snow. Drops of blood dotted the frozen crust. Tiny but following the path. I touched one lightly, still soft in the center. Not yet frozen solid. Something violent had happened not long before she ran into my station. I tried my radio. Sheriff to base. Do you copy? Silence. Sheriff to base. Are you receiving? Nothing but a blank static. Not even the faint chatter of distant channels. As if the trees themselves were swallowing the signal. I stepped deeper along the trail. My breath formed a thin fog in front of me. The cold bit harder at my face. Every few steps I paused, listening. Then it came. A crunch behind me, farther back. Heavy, slow, deliberate. I spun around, flashlight sweeping across the trees. Nothing moved, but I felt eyes on me. A pressure on my skin like the air had thickened. I took a step backward, then another, unconsciously trying to walk softer, as if noise might provoke something. Another crunch, closer this time. The trees stood tall and skeletal, shadows long and black across the trail. Not a single branch moved. But ahead, the claw marks were different. They no longer faced inward. They spiraled, starting wide, then narrowing in tight patterns around the trunks. Almost like rings. I leaned closer. The cuts twisted with intention, not rage. Something ancient or symbolic. My flashlight flickered, then steadied. A faint sound froze me. A soft drip. Then another. And another. I swept the flashlight upward. On a low branch, droplets collected at the tip of the bark. Blood, fresh, fell into the snow, staining the white. Then I heard it again. That faint chewing. Wet, rhythmic, slow. My heart punched against my ribs. The sound came from deeper ahead, muffled by trees and snow, but unmistakable. Something was feeding, tearing into flesh, unbothered by the cold or my presence. If anyone is out there, call out, I said, my voice unsteady. I am here to help. No answer. Just chewing. Slower now. More deliberate. I stepped closer, the flashlight trembling. The beam caught movement. A branch shifting. A shadow lowering itself behind a tree trunk. Then the chewing stopped. Instantly, the silence snapped shut like a jaw. I stood rooted. Something shifted behind a cluster of pines. A tall silhouette, thin to the point of unnaturalness, slipped between the trees with a fluid motion that did not belong in any world I recognized. Antlers scraped softly against a trunk, breaking a sheet of frost that fell in glittering shards. The creature paused, watching me. Even without seeing its face, I felt its gaze like a cold hand closing around my lungs. I raised the flashlight higher. The beam reached the trunk. The figure was gone. Only the claw marks remained. Deep, fresh, pointing inward. They were not markings of territory. Not warnings. They were guiding paths. The Wendigo had carved itself a trail, and I had walked right into it. For a long moment I stood there, clutching my flashlight so tightly that my knuckles ached through my gloves. The trees around me formed a cage of black trunks and claw marks, and the silence felt alive. The spot where I had glimpsed that figure was now empty. A cruel invitation. A faint exhale drifted out from deeper along the trail. Not mine. Not human. Soft as frost falling from a branch. A breath with a hint of hunger. I raised my flashlight again and stepped toward the sound. Not for bravery. Not for duty. Because I knew if I turned away now, whatever waited in those trees would follow me back. Maybe to the station. Maybe to the girl. Each step felt heavier than the last. Snow crunched softly under my boots. My flashlight beam shook over the trees, the claw marks, the spiraling patterns. They grew tighter, sharper, as though something had dragged its claws along the trunks while circling prey. The trees opened into a small clearing. The snow lay untouched except for one long streak where something had been dragged. Something heavy. Something limp. I followed the trail with my flashlight. At the far end of the clearing, tangled among the roots of an old pine, was a backpack half buried in snow. The fabric torn open as if ripped by long fingers. A water bottle lay beside it, punctured. A notebook with bent pages. A cracked phone. The dragging mark continued past the backpack and vanished into a narrow gap between two pines. The chewing sound echoed again. Clearer now. Closer. A wet pull. Teeth tearing. Something worked over with slow, methodical hunger. I raised my flashlight toward the narrow opening and took one step. The air changed. Colder. My lungs struggled to draw breath. Frost formed at the edges of my vision. My fingers stiffened around the flashlight. Then I saw the creature's hand. At first I thought it was a twisted branch. But branches do not end in long, skeletal fingers. They do not tremble in anticipation. They do not curl slowly around the edge of a tree trunk like something thinking. The hand withdrew silently, but the chewing continued. Steady and unhurried, as though it knew I was there and did not care. I tried my radio again. Sheriff to base. Anyone hearing this? Please respond. Only static. The creature was interfering with my radio. Or the forest no longer followed normal rules. My light skimmed across the trees until it caught something buried in the snow. I knelt, clearing the frost away. A boot. Small. Lightweight. The girl had run through here without it. She had been farther into the forest than I realized. Farther into the path the creature carved. I stood, breathing harder. The chewing stopped, replaced by the softest crack of something moving. Trees shifted. A branch lifted without wind. The entire trail seemed to draw in around me. Then I saw it. Not fully. Not clearly. But enough. A tall shape rose from behind the pines. Taller than any man. Thin as a corpse left too long in winter. Limbs bent at wrong angles. Antlers spread from its head. Crooked and jagged like torn roots. Snow clung to its ribs as if they protruded through its skin. It moved its head. I saw its eyes. Reflective. Pale. Sunken. Empty of humanity. Full of hunger. Eyes that looked through me, measuring whether I was worth chasing. The creature lowered whatever it held in its claws. Something soft fell into the snow with a faint thud. Then it took one slow step toward me. Another. The snow did not crunch beneath its feet. It made no sound. The world seemed to hold its breath. I stepped backward, my heel catching a root. The creature paused, head tilting in a jerky, unnatural motion, studying me. Its antlers scraped a branch, spilling tiny crystals of frost. A voice broke the silence. Not spoken, not human, a faint whisper that crawled through the trees. Help me. My body went rigid. It was the girl's voice, perfectly mimicked, perfectly wrong. Help me. I understood then. It was not calling for help. It was calling me. One more step and I would be close enough for it to reach. The trees behind me creaked. A breeze that did not feel natural brushed my collar. My breath came in harsh bursts. The claw marks had not led me to the creature. They had led the creature to me. I backed away. The creature leaned forward, its body tensing. Another step. It lowered itself as if preparing to spring. A third step. Its jaw opened, teeth long and jagged, and a cold breath spilled into the air. I turned and ran. I did not fire a shot. I did not look back. I ran through the claw-marked trees, through the spiraling patterns, through the frozen silence that smothered the trail. Behind me, the forest remained silent, too silent, as if something immense waited among the pines, watching me flee. I ran until my lungs burned and the cold sliced my throat. Branches whipped against my coat as I stumbled over roots and drifts of half-frozen snow. I did not stop. The silence felt like it chased me. When I burst back onto the main trail, the clearing's openness made my legs buckle. I leaned against a tree, gasping. The forest remained utterly still. No footsteps, no heavy breaths, no whispers in the girl's voice. Only the faint groan of branches. I straightened slowly and shined my flashlight back toward the path I had fled. The beam flickered, then steadied, lighting only thin trunks and claw marks etched into their bark. The spiral pattern still twisted along the trees, tightening like a noose. The creature was gone. Or waiting. Sheriff calling base. Anyone copy, I said, voice trembling. Static. Sheriff calling base. Urgent. Please respond. More static, with a faint hint of breath buried beneath it. I swallowed and moved toward the trailhead, flashlight high, my other hand near my holster. The forest seemed to shift, trees leaning as though tracking me. My breath drifted upward like smoke. Every step felt like it might be my last. At the trailhead I paused. My cruiser sat a short distance away, covered in a thin sheen of frost. The engine silent. For a moment I felt relief. Then I saw the snow beside the vehicle. Footprints. Not mine. Large, misshapen, shaped like a distorted blend of hoof and elongated toes, sinking deep into the snow. They circled the cruiser once, then vanished into the trees opposite the trail. The creature had reached my vehicle. I approached carefully, checking the windows. The driver's side glass had faint streaks, as if something had dragged sharp points across it. I wiped a gloved finger over one. The ice had melted slightly along the edges. Fresh. It had been here recently. Maybe moments ago. My breath hitched. It had followed me this far. It had circled my cruiser. It might have been closer than I wanted to imagine while I was in the woods. Or worse, it had been watching the girl inside the station before she ran to me. I slid into the driver's seat and locked every door with trembling fingers. The heater groaned to life. Frost melted from the windshield, but the silence remained. Heavy. Waiting. I turned the key. The engine rumbled. Headlights cut through the dark, illuminating the first few trees. For a split second, I thought I saw a tall figure slip behind a trunk, antlers brushing snow-dusted branches. Then it was gone. I drove back slowly, the forest pressing close to the road, pines arching above like a tunnel of shadows. Every cracking branch made me tighten my grip on the wheel. When the station lights finally appeared, I let out a breath I did not know I had been holding. The girl was still inside, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the floor. The moment I stepped through the door, she jumped to her feet. "Did you find it?" Her voice trembled. I hesitated, then shook my head. "Not exactly. You saw something. I can tell. You saw it." I scanned the room. Shadows on the walls felt heavier now, thicker, as if something pressed against the building from outside. "Something is out there," I said quietly. "Something dangerous." She shuddered. "I tried to tell you. It followed us." I froze. "What do you mean us?" She pointed toward the door, toward the darkness beyond the windows. "Followed me here. I felt it watching me all the way to town." Cold sweat gathered under my collar. If it had followed her, then the claw marks were not random. They were tracking patterns, a path to herd her, to watch her, maybe to corner her. And I had walked right into that same path. I reached for the radio, base to all units. Anyone near the station. Static. A low hum rose beneath it, like a faint whisper. Not a voice, more like breath. I turned the volume down. The girl hugged herself tightly. "It knows your scent now. That is what my father told me. Once it finds you, it does not forget." Her voice broke. I tried to reassure her, but the words stuck in my throat. Even inside the station, the air felt wrong. Heavy. Silent. Then something tapped the window. Not a branch. Not wind. A single, sharp tap. The girl whimpered, backing away. I stepped closer, heart pounding. Outside was pitch black. No movement. No shape. I touched the frost-lined glass. And from deep within the forest beyond the station, carried faintly through the cold, came a sound that turned my blood to ice. A long, slow exhale. The same one I had heard on the trail. The Wendigo had followed me. And it was close. Too close. There are memories that erode slowly, like river stones smoothed by years of current. And then there are memories that freeze in place forever, sharp enough to cut no matter how much time passes. What happened after that night belongs to the second kind. For weeks after the girl ran into my station, the forest seemed different. The cold felt sharper. The wind moved strangely. Nights lingered longer than they should. Every time I stepped outside, I felt watched. Not always by eyes I could see, but by something old and patient. We sent the girl home after her parents came for her. She never walked into the woods again. I saw her at the grocery store a month later. Her hands still shook when she picked up a box of cereal. She avoided my eyes. I did not blame her, because I had changed too. The forest had claimed a part of me. Whatever belief I had that nature played by rules I understood was gone, replaced by the image of a tall, skeletal figure slipping between dark trunks, by the sound of chewing, by claw marks spiraling inward like a trap. After that night, I filed the official report. I kept it simple. I wrote that the girl had panicked after seeing a deer, that the forest showed signs of normal wildlife activity, that I heard nothing unusual. The words felt like ash, but I wrote them anyway, because the alternative was a truth no one was ready for. I did not sleep well for months. Whenever the wind blew from the direction of the woods, I woke with a start. Some nights I swore I heard footsteps outside the station. Soft, slow, testing the walls, testing the doors. I stopped walking the perimeter at night. My deputies noticed. One asked why I flinched at every hard gust against the windows. I told them winter was getting to me, but cold alone had never rattled me before. What rattled me was the truth. There are things in those woods that no report can record. Things no law can touch. Things that existed long before my badge or my station or the paved roads cutting through the pines. Things that know hunger. Things that know fear. Things that mimic human voices with uncanny precision. And things that watch. Always watch. I tried to convince myself the creature had moved on. That the girl had wandered too close and it had drifted away to another territory. Then the claw marks returned. Just one set. On a spruce near the trailhead. Carved inward. I brushed frost from the grooves. The marks were fresh. The same shape. The same deliberate pull. It had not moved on. It had not forgotten. It had simply been waiting. Winter melted into spring, and the forest changed colors, but the memories did not. I still avoided the deeper trails. The girl's story stayed with me, and that night on the trail, when the creature whispered in a stolen voice, crept forward whenever I closed my eyes. Years passed, but the silence never did. Even now, long after I left that station behind, the woods still call to me. In winter, when the temperature sinks and the trees crack under frost, I hear it again. Not loud, not clear, but enough. A faint chewing carried on the wind. A slow breath in the darkness outside my porch. A whisper of movement at the tree line. When I retired, I moved farther from the forest. Bought a small home near town, away from the trails. Neighbors, lights, noise. A place that should feel safe. But on certain nights, when the moon is thin and the sky feels too open, I still wake to the same sound I first heard on that trail. Chewing. Wet. Steady. Patient. And I know it is not my imagination, because every winter morning after I hear it, I find the same thing near the edge of my yard. One tree, clawed inward, facing my house, waiting, watching. My official report says the girl panicked, that nothing unusual happened, that the trail showed normal animal behavior. I lied. I did it to protect the town from knowing what lives in the woods. But I know the truth. When I reached that trail on the night she ran into my station, I did not find a frightened girl imagining things. I found claw marks carved toward the center of the woods. Carved toward me. And when I heard that chewing in the darkness, I understood exactly what had happened. The Wendigo had been feeding, and I had interrupted it. I found the girl's phone near the blood, but I never found the hiker. And the chewing stopped only because the creature saw something more interesting. Me. To this day, when the cold settles deep and the woods fall silent, I hear the same sound drifting through the trees. Chewing. Slow. Hungry. Waiting. And every time I hear it, I remember the moment my flashlight swept across the claw marks and I realized they were facing inward. Because that was the moment the forest stopped being just a forest and became something else. A cage. A warning. Or maybe a mouth. And inside it, I was not the hunter. I was prey.